Millionaire visits her son's grave and finds a black waitress weeping with a child. She was shocked. A light August rain fell steadily over Rosehill Cemetery, softening the edges of the marble headstones and painting the air with the scent of wet earth and libilllies. Eleanor Whitmore walked slowly between the rows of graves, the hem of her coat brushing damp grass, white lilies clutched in her gloved hands. It had become her yearly ritual, same week, same hour, same bouquet, for 3 years. But today, something was different. As she approached Adrian's grave, she saw them, 2 figures, kneeling in front of the stone she had come to mourn. A young black woman in a faded green diner uniform held a little girl close. Both were crying, not loudly, but with the aching quiet of those who had been grieving too long. The child looked no older than 4, her tiny hands wrapped around a bright yellow sunflower. Eleanor froze, her breath catching as the rain misted across her face. She didn't recognize either of them, and yet something stirred. The child's delicate profile, the shape of her nose, the tilt of her brow. Then the little girl looked up, and Eleanor's heart faltered. Blue eyes, wide, unmistakable. Adrian's eyes. Her pulse quickened. "This is a private visit," Eleanor said, her voice sharp and cold, slicing through the gentle sound of rain. "You shouldn't be here." The woman turned slowly, lifting her tear-streaked face to meet Eleanor's. Her expression wasn't defensive. It was calm, quiet, dignified. "I didn't know anyone else would be coming today," she said. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. "We always come around this time. Every August." Eleanor narrowed her gaze. Her business instincts kicked in like reflex. "Who are you?" she asked. "And why are you crying at my son's grave?" The little girl glanced up again, those same haunting blue eyes blinking against the rain. Her curls were soaked and clung to her cheeks, but she didn't flinch beneath Eleanor's gaze. She simply leaned into her mother's side, sunflower still clutched in her hand. "My name is Kiana Brooks," the woman replied. "And this is Lila." She hesitated. "She's Adrian's daughter." Time buckled around Eleanor. The bouquet slipped from her grip, white lilies scattering across the wet stone. For a long moment, she said nothing. Just stared at the child who could not possibly exist, yet stood before her as solid as the grave itself. "His daughter?" Eleanor finally whispered. "That's impossible. Adrian never. He would have told me." "He didn't," Kiana said gently. "For a reason." Raindrops pattered on Eleanor's coat. Her thoughts spun, grasping for logic, for control. "You expect me to believe this? That my son fathered a child I knew nothing about? With a waitress?" Kiana's chin lifted slightly. "It wasn't a secret to him. He was with me by choice. And he loved his daughter." Eleanor's breath came short. No, I would have seen the signs. He would have said something. I read his journals. I searched through his things after the accident, because you needed to control the story," Kiana said, cutting in softly. "But Adrian wasn't the same man you tried to shape. He was trying to get away from all of that." Eleanor staggered a step back. The cold rain now soaked through her gloves, the lilies at her feet limp and broken. She looked again at the child, Lila, still standing silently beside her mother, watching her with curious, knowing eyes. Those eyes were a mirror to the past. "I don't understand," Eleanor said. "Why would he hide something like this?" Kiana knelt again by the grave, brushing raindrops from the stone. "He didn't hide her. He protected her. He knew what the Whitmore name could do, and he didn't want that legacy touching her, not until she was old enough to understand." Eleanor's voice was a whisper now. "He didn't trust me." "No," Kiana said honestly. "He loved you, but he didn't trust what you'd become." The words hit harder than expected. For years Eleanor had buried that thought, pushed it down under titles, power, and grief. She had ruled Whitmore Industries with a fierce hand. She raised Adrian to lead. And when he pulled away, she thought it was rebellion. Now she realized it had been resistance. "How long have you been coming here?" she asked. "Since the year he died," Kiana answered. "Always on the anniversary. I never expected to run into you, but I suppose it was only a matter of time." Eleanor looked away, her jaw clenched. "And what do you want? Money? An apology?" Kiana shook her head. "I want nothing from you. I came here for Adrian. For Lila. She deserves to know who he was, even if that means facing this moment." The rain picked up, blurring the headstone slightly as droplets ran down its carved letters. Eleanor blinked the water from her eyes. Or maybe it wasn't just rain now. Lila stepped forward then, carefully laying the sunflower beside the scattered lilies. She reached out and touched the marble with one small hand, fingers barely grazing the name etched into stone. Then she looked at Eleanor and smiled. It wasn't a smile of innocence. It was a smile that held more understanding than a child should carry. And somehow, it undid Eleanor completely. "I need a moment," she whispered, turning away. Kiana gently took Lila's hand. "We'll go," she said. "We didn't mean to invade your space. But this was ours too." They walked away without another word. Eleanor remained, standing motionless in the rain, her world shattered quietly by the presence of a sunflower and a child with blue eyes. The rain had stopped, but the scent of it lingered. Dampness clung to the curtains of Eleanor Whitmore's study as she sat motionless in the armchair near the fireplace, the bouquet of lilies from the cemetery now drooping in a crystal vase beside her. She hadn't turned on the lights. The room remained dim, shadowed in twilight and reflection. But her mind was racing. Those eyes, Lila's eyes, not just Adrian's. They were unmistakably hers too. That piercing, unforgettable shade of blue. A trait passed down through generations of Whitmores, present in nearly every family portrait, every oil painting that lined the corridors of the estate. Eleanor had always considered them a symbol of legacy, of purity, of power. Now those same eyes had looked up at her from a child she'd never known existed. A child who had called no mansion home. A child raised by a waitress. A black waitress. She opened the old cedar chest beside the fireplace with shaking hands. It had remained untouched for 3 years, since the day Adrian was buried. Beneath a silk scarf lay a stack of photographs, some fading, some sharp. She pulled out a handful and laid them on the table. Adrian at age 10, smiling awkwardly with braces. Adrian as a teenager, arms folded stubbornly across his chest at some family gathering. Adrian at 28, a photograph taken 6 weeks before the accident, distant eyes, a half smile, and something else. Something Eleanor hadn't noticed at the time, weariness, a quiet weight in his posture. She remembered the tension, the way he had begun to avoid the company events, the way he no longer smiled during board meetings, and their last argument. Oh, she could still feel the heat of it. "You need to stop pretending the past never happened," he had said, standing across from her in this very room, his voice steady but filled with something close to contempt. "I've moved on from those mistakes," she had replied coldly. "Have you? Or did you just bury them deep enough to forget they ever existed?" She hadn't answered. Couldn't. She had waved him off, accusing him of youthful rebellion, of disloyalty. She never knew that would be their final conversation. But now, she began to wonder. Was he protecting someone? No, someone and something. A child. She closed her eyes and tried to remember if Adrian had ever spoken about someone named Amara. The name scratched faintly at her memory, like a forgotten whisper behind a closed door. It didn't belong to the boardroom, nor the social galas. It belonged to the past, a branch of the family tree she had cut away years ago. Her cousin, Lana Daniels. That was it. Years ago, they had quarreled over property rights, inheritance disputes, land titles. The old Southern kind of family feud, soaked in pride and buried secrets. Lana had walked away, vowing never to speak to Eleanor again. Eleanor had ensured her name vanished from the family trust records. Could Adrian have found her daughter? Could he have loved her? She gripped the armrest, her knuckles turning pale. Down in a modest neighborhood across town, Kiana Brooks sat at her kitchen table, a warm cup of tea in her hand. Her best friend Naomi sat across from her, eyebrows raised, waiting. The low hum of Lila's cartoons played from the living room. "You told her?" Naomi asked. "I didn't have to," Kiana said. She saw the truth. She looked at Lila and knew. Naomi leaned back, and she didn't scream or deny it. She was shaken, like she'd seen a ghost. Kiana replied. "But it's not over. She still doesn't know everything." Naomi crossed her arms. "You're sure you want to do this? It's not too late to walk away. You've protected Lila this long, without stepping into the lion's den. I didn't wait 3 years to walk away now," Kiana said firmly. "She needs to know who Lila is, who Adrian really was, and she needs to remember what she did to Amara." Naomi sighed. "She won't take it lightly." "She doesn't have to," Kiana said, her voice quiet but unwavering. "This isn't about her comfort. It's about truth." Naomi looked down into her mug, then back at her friend. "Does Lila know?" "Bits and pieces," Kiana said. "I tell her about her dad, that he was brave, that he loved her, that he chose us over everything." "She's going to grow up fast," Naomi murmured. Kiana looked toward the living room, where Lila was now curled up on the couch, a stuffed rabbit in her lap. She already has. The kitchen fell silent for a few seconds, the weight of everything unspoken stretching between them. I think about Adrian all the time, Kiana added. The things he told me in private. How he hated being trapped between loyalty and morality. He wanted to expose the truth, Naomi. He was going to. He said his mother's past would destroy everything if it came to light. Naomi sat up straighter. So the files. You still have them. Kiana nodded. Tucked away. Password protected. Names. Contracts. Dates. Whistleblower statements he gathered behind her back. Naomi's voice dropped. That could ruin her. Kiana looked down at her hands. That's not the point. This isn't revenge. This is justice. For Adrian. For Amara. For Lila. Eleanor can face the truth, or it will face her. Outside, the rain had begun again, tapping gently on the roof, steady and soft. At the Whitmore estate, Eleanor opened a worn, leather-bound address book from her father's time. She flipped through the pages and stopped at a name she hadn't seen in years, Amara L. Daniels. Born, 1992. Mother, Lana Whitmore Daniels. Eleanor stared at the name as a dull pressure built behind her temples. The room around her dimmed, and the past whispered again, not just with guilt, but with prophecy. She had buried more than memories. She had buried blood. And now the storm she thought would never come was already here. The Whitmore estate stood like a fortress, grand, cold, and impossibly still. Nestled behind towering wrought iron gates and guarded by trimmed hedges and polished stone lions, it was the kind of place built not for warmth, but for legacy. It loomed more than it welcomed. Kiana Brooks stood at the base of the marble steps, her gaze lifting to the massive oak doors ahead. Lila wasn't with her today. She had left her daughter with Naomi, insisting this meeting was not one for small ears or tender hearts. A maid opened the door and stepped aside without a word. Kiana entered. The floor beneath her feet gleamed like ice. High ceilings stretched above, adorned with chandeliers that looked too heavy for their chains. The walls were lined with oil portraits of Whitmore's past, stern faces in even sterner suits. Every corner of the house spoke of power wrapped in silence. Eleanor waited in the drawing room. She rose when Kiana entered, her smile polite but hollow. She was dressed in tailored gray, her posture perfect, her eyes unreadable. Thank you for accepting my invitation, Eleanor said. Please sit. Kiana took a seat on the edge of the velvet sofa. She didn't sink in. She didn't relax. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon, Kiana said evenly. Eleanor clasped her hands, one over the other. After our meeting at the cemetery, I felt it was necessary. What happened there? It was shocking. To learn of Lila's existence under those circumstances was a surprise. Kiana offered. Or an inconvenience? Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. A surprise, she replied coolly. But not one I intend to ignore. Kiana folded her hands in her lap. That's good to hear. There was a pause. The kind of pause that didn't stretch, it snapped. Eleanor reached into a side drawer and pulled out a slim folder, placing it on the mahogany table between them. I've had time to think, to process, and I've come up with a solution I believe benefits everyone involved. Kiana didn't touch the folder. I want what's best for Lila, Eleanor continued. She deserves every opportunity, the best schools, the finest health care, a future with stability. And frankly, with the Whitmore name behind her, the world will open up for her in ways you can't imagine. Kiana nodded slowly. And what does that future require? Eleanor's eyes flicked toward the folder. Custody. Legal guardianship. In exchange, I'll ensure you're compensated generously. You'll never have to work again. Lila will live here, receive the best education money can buy, and be raised in the lifestyle that Adrian was born into. Kiana let the words hang in the air. The chandelier above them swayed slightly, catching the sunlight and scattering diamonds on the floor. Somewhere in the house, a grandfather clock ticked away in judgment. I see, Kiana said finally. Her voice was quiet, controlled. You're a smart woman, Eleanor said, misreading the silence. Surely you understand what this means. You've done well so far, but let's not pretend that raising a child alone is easy, especially not one carrying the Whitmore legacy. Kiana looked up, meeting Eleanor's eyes fully. I'm not pretending. Eleanor's brows lifted. Excuse me. I'm not pretending anything, Kiana said, her tone still calm. I've raised Lila without your money, your name, or your approval. And she's happy. She's strong. She knows love, not legacy. Eleanor's composure wavered, just for a second. This isn't about love, she said. It's about her future. No, Kiana replied, her voice tightening. It's about control. There it was. The crack in the ice. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. You may not understand now, but one day you'll realize what a missed opportunity this is. I am offering Lila the world. And taking her from everything she knows, Kiana answered. From me. You think I won't fight for her? Kiana stood, slowly, deliberately. Oh, I know you will. But so will I. And I didn't come here empty-handed. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. What does that mean? It means, Kiana said, that I've spent the last 3 years preparing for this conversation. You may not remember what you did to Amara, what you did to her family, but I do. And I'm not afraid of your empire, Eleanor, because I've seen the cracks in your walls. The room stilled. Eleanor rose to her feet. She was taller, more commanding, but the authority in the room had shifted. You're making a mistake, she said. You think you can threaten me? Kiana didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. No, I'm reminding you. You don't own everything. For a beat, the air felt electric. Not loud, not dramatic. Just charged with warning, with truth, with the unspoken weight of what Kiana carried. Then, without another word, Kiana turned and walked toward the door. Eleanor didn't stop her. She watched the young woman disappear down the long hallway, her footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rug beneath them. When the door finally closed behind her, Eleanor exhaled. A sharp, cold breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Outside, clouds gathered again over the estate. The rain hadn't returned, but it was coming. Inside Kiana's chest, a different storm had already begun. She stepped into her car, heart pounding not from fear, but from resolve. Eleanor Whitmore had no idea what she had just invited into her house. This wasn't just about Lila anymore. This was about Amara. This was about Adrian. This was about truth. And Eleanor, so used to power, so used to people folding, was about to learn that control isn't inherited. It's earned. It began in whispers, in late-night calls Adrian never explained, in hours spent hunched over a desk in his apartment, documents scattered like puzzle pieces he couldn't yet fit together. He had always been thoughtful, curious, but in those final months, something had changed. He was consumed. The first real clue came from a folder marked with a name no one in the family had spoken in years. Amara L. Daniels, his cousin, his mother's betrayal. Adrian sat in silence that night, the soft glow of his laptop illuminating the shadows under his eyes. He read every page. Property transfers, fraudulent signatures, a sealed court document with a forged timestamp. Eleanor had buried the Daniels family under legal ruin, manipulated city officials, falsified ownership deeds, and blackmailed judges into silence. And when Lana Daniels, Amara's mother, had tried to fight back, she had been quietly erased, her business dismantled, her reputation shattered. Eleanor had always framed it as a necessary family separation. But Adrian knew now. It was sabotage. And Amara, bright, unshakable Amara, had suffered because of it. They had found each other years later, two branches of the same broken tree. Their bond wasn't born of family ties, but of defiance. Love had bloomed in the spaces where truth had been hidden. From that love came Lila. And with Lila's birth, Adrian's mission changed. He no longer wanted to just uncover his mother's secrets. He wanted to bring them to light. In the present day, rain fell lightly on the roof of a modest brick law office tucked behind a quiet corner of Charleston. Inside, Kiana Brooks sat at a long table beside her friend Naomi, a thick binder in front of them. Across the table, a silver-haired lawyer adjusted his glasses while a retired journalist, once a thorn in Eleanor Whitmore's side, clicked open a battered leather case. She kept everything, Kiana said, voice low but steady. Every file, every voice recording. Adrian hid them in a safe deposit box under a false name. It took me months to find the key. The lawyer opened the binder. What you have here, this isn't just a case against Eleanor Whitmore. This is the unraveling of a corporate web that touches politicians, bankers, and law enforcement. These documents, he tapped the first page, could bring down half the names in the Charleston elite. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Gloria Mason, leaned forward. I've been trying to touch the Whitmores for over 2 decades, but I never had proof. Now, you're giving me what no one else could. Kiana didn't blink. I'm giving you what Adrian died trying to share. Naomi reached over and rested a hand gently on her friend's arm. "You're sure you want to go through with this?" "Yes," Kiana said, her voice firm. "Lila deserves the truth. Not a story crafted by Eleanor's lawyers. Not a whitewashed family legacy. The truth." Gloria's fingers hovered over her recorder. "Then tell me everything." Kiana exhaled and began. "He found the files a year before he died. We just moved into the apartment together. He was distant, tense. At first, I thought it was the pressure of being the Whitmore heir. But one night, he showed me a photograph. It was of Amara when she was 16. He said, she had nothing because of my mother. That was the night he started digging." Gloria scribbled notes, nodding. Adrian traced bank transfers to shell companies. He confronted one of Eleanor's former assistants. She gave him a recording of a call where Eleanor told her to make the Daniels family disappear. He even met with a judge who confirmed Eleanor paid to have legal documents destroyed. The lawyer flipped the binder. "And the voice memos?" "There are 17 of them," Kiana said. Adrian recorded conversations with board members, city officials. He even caught his mother on tape once, warning him to let the past stay buried or lose everything. "He sent me a copy the day before the crash." Naomi added quietly he feared for his life. He told Kiana that if anything happened to him, it wouldn't be an accident. Gloria's hands tightened around her pin. Back in time, Adrian had sat alone in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, recorder balanced on the dash. He had just come from a tense lunch with his mother. She had smiled the whole time, told him he was too sentimental for this world. But her words were sharper than the silver she wore. "You don't understand what I've done to protect this family," she had whispered. "And you never will." He had pressed record, but he hadn't lived to press stop. In the present, the lawyer closed the binder carefully. "We can build a legal case. We'll start with the media release, then push for a federal investigation. But you need to be ready. Once this begins, there's no going back." Kiana nodded. Her face didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't waver. "I've waited 3 years for this," she said. "This was never about revenge. This was about Lila. One day, she'll ask me what happened to her father, and I will not lie to her." Gloria looked at her with quiet admiration. "You're doing what most people wouldn't dare." "I'm doing what Adrian couldn't finish," Kiana replied, "and what Eleanor never expected." The shadows outside deepened. The rain kept falling, but inside the office, something stirred, an energy, a momentum that had been building since the day Adrian died. Now it was gathering strength. Kiana looked out the window. Somewhere, Lila was curled up on the couch with Naomi's dog, humming to herself. Too young to understand the fire being lit in her name. But one day she would. And on that day, she would know the truth, not the Whitmore version, not the legacy built on silence, but the one her father gave everything to uncover. The sky over Charleston cracked with thunder as the storm finally broke. Rain hammered the windows of the Whitmore Industries headquarters. Sleek glass towers once seen as symbols of ambition and power, now mirrored only chaos and sirens. Inside, the clack of heels and murmurs of alarm gave way to shouting as federal agents in dark suits swept through the lobby. "Federal warrant," someone barked. "Nobody leaves the building." On the top floor, Eleanor Whitmore stood behind her desk, staring out at the gray horizon. Her office, once pristine, now shaken by the tremors of truth, echoed with the sound of boots on marble. A manila folder still sat unopened on her desk. It had arrived that morning. She hadn't needed to read it. She already knew. The door burst open. "Eleanor Whitmore," the agent said, stepping forward, "you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit racketeering, and obstruction of justice." Eleanor turned slowly, chin raised, face hard. Her hands were cuffed without ceremony. Outside, news helicopters circled above like vultures. Headlines lit up across the nation. "Whitmore empire crumbles, heiress arrested, and Adrian Whitmore's death tied to corporate scandal." But the real blow came in the courtroom. It was standing room only. The prosecution's evidence was damning. Wire transfers, falsified contracts, whistleblower testimony. Then came the recordings. Adrian's voice, captured in secret, naming names, piecing together the rot inside the empire he had once been groomed to inherit. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the courtroom as the final nail was driven in. Adrian had intended to go public. He had planned to meet with investigators the very night he died. The crash had not been an accident. It had been calculated silence. By her order. Gasps. A stunned pause. Eleanor sat, handcuffed, unmoving as the courtroom erupted in whispers and wide-eyed stares. Her sharp suits, her carefully composed image, meant nothing now. They couldn't mask the truth etched across the screens. They couldn't drown out Adrian's recorded voice or the weight of her silence. And then she saw them. Kiana sat in the gallery, composed but unshakable. Beside her, Lila sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, her bright blue eyes watching Eleanor with the same piercing stillness that had haunted her since that rainy August day. Their eyes met. For the first time, Eleanor's mask cracked. Not from guilt, not even from shame, but from loss. Real, soul-deep loss. The legacy she had clung to, the name she had protected with ruthless hands, the empire she built from the ashes of betrayal, it was all gone. Her son, her bloodline, her power, gone. And in its place sat a woman she once tried to silence, and a little girl who carried the Whitmore name far more truthfully than she ever had. Eleanor lowered her head, not in surrender, but in the hollow recognition that the queen had finally fallen, not with fire, but with truth. The sun was beginning to slip behind the oak trees, casting long golden shadows across the front yard. The house stood tall and quiet, its wraparound porch painted freshly white, its shutters newly hung, its bones old but warm again. The wind blew gently through the pines, carrying with it laughter small and sweet. Lila's laughter. Kiana stood barefoot at the threshold of the home Adrian had once only described in wistful words and quiet sketches. A house with a blue roof, wraparound porch, and a yard big enough for kids to run wild. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere honest. It had taken years to get here. Years of loss. Years of waiting. Years of choosing not to break. Now, she was standing in the very place Adrian once dreamed of raising his family. And it no longer belonged to silence. It belonged to Lila. Legally. Rightfully. She ran barefoot across the porch now, chasing a cotton ball cloud of bubbles blown from a plastic wand. Her laughter rang like wind chimes, her curls bouncing with each hop. Around her neck, resting just above her small chest, was a delicate silver locket, oval-shaped, simple, beautiful. It had once belonged to Amara, given to her by Adrian on the day she told him she was pregnant. Now, it belonged to their daughter. Kiana leaned against the doorframe, watching the scene unfold as if it were being painted before her eyes. The light, the sound, the life. All of it was what Adrian had dreamed. A home that was free of the shadows his last name had once cast. She stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of pine wood and old books. The floors creaked gently under her steps, but it wasn't an eerie sound. It was the sound of something that had lived and had been loved again. On the shelf by the window sat the only piece of furniture that had belonged to Adrian, a small wooden chest, worn at the corners, the brass latch dulled with time. She opened it carefully. Inside were the things he had left behind. A sketch of a house with a blue roof, a photo of Amara smiling in the sunlight, and a leather-bound journal with a cracked spine. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. It was his handwriting, impossibly familiar, painfully intimate. She sat down by the window as Lila's laughter echoed through the porch screen. She opened the journal. March 15th, she told me today. I didn't think anything could surprise me anymore, but when Amara placed my hand over her belly and whispered, "You're going to be a father," I felt like the ground opened up beneath me, and I fell straight into the sky. Kiana smiled through the tears. April 2nd, I see the fear in her eyes sometimes. Not of me, but of my world. She knows what my mother is capable of. She's seen what she did to her own. But I promised her, our child will not grow up in fear. She'll grow up in love. I don't know why I wrote that. I don't even know the gender yet. But something in me feels it. Kiana covered her mouth, tears sliding freely now. May 27th, I've started gathering evidence. It's dangerous, I know. But if something happens to me, this is for her. For our baby. For the truth. I won't let Eleanor erase another life to protect her name. I've made copies. I've sent one to Kiana. Her breath hitched. She remembered that envelope arriving at her door the day before the accident. At the time, she hadn't understood the full depth. Now it all made sense. June 4th sometimes, I press my ear to Amara's stomach and whisper things I'm too afraid to say aloud. I tell our daughter that I'm sorry. That the world is a mess, but she is the best part of it. I tell her that she is already more than her last name. That she comes from fire and grace. And if I don't make it to hold her, I hope she knows she was always worth fighting for. Kiana's tears weren't from sorrow anymore. They were from recognition. From the weight of love in his words. From the truth that this journal, this window into Adrian's heart, was no longer a relic of what was lost. It was a gift. For Lila. For now. From the porch, small footsteps pattered toward her. Lila peeked inside, locket still resting over her heart. "Mommy." Kiana looked up and wiped her face quickly, managing a smile. "Yes, baby." "What are you reading?" She held up the book gently. "Something your daddy wrote." "Would you like to hear some of it?" Lila nodded and came to curl in her lap, still smelling of sunshine and rainwater. Kiana opened to a page that didn't speak of danger, or fear, or justice, but of hope. June 30th, I had a dream last night. She was 5 years old, running barefoot through the grass, sunlight in her hair, wearing the necklace I gave Amara. And she laughed like the world was brand new. I woke up crying, not because I was sad, but because I knew that dream wasn't fiction. It was a memory from the future, a promise I'll hold on to, no matter what. Kiana's voice caught, and Lila looked up at her. "Did he really dream about me?" Kiana nodded. "He dreamed everything. This house. You. Your laugh. That necklace." Lila clutched the locket gently. "Then he's not gone, right?" "No," Kiana whispered. "He's here. In every laugh. In every page. In every truth we speak." Outside, the wind swayed through the trees again. The porch creaked as if remembering the weight of Adrian's hopes. And in the golden warmth of that summer evening, truth no longer whispered in secret. It lived. Right here. In Lila's smile. The auditorium was quiet. Hundreds of students, teachers, and parents sat still in their seats, the kind of stillness reserved for something sacred. On stage, beneath soft amber lights, stood Lila Whitmore, 17 now, poised, composed, eyes steady. Her curls were pinned back, and around her neck gleamed the silver locket her father had once given her mother. She held a sheet of paper in her hands, but she didn't look down. "My name is Lila Whitmore," she began, her voice calm and clear. "And this is the truth that built me." From the audience, Kiana sat near the front, her hands folded in her lap, her chest tight with pride. Years had passed, but moments like this reminded her that everything, the silence, the storm, the sacrifice, had led to this day. Lila continued. "My father, Adrian, didn't live long enough to see me walk or talk or dance barefoot in the backyard. But he gave me something bigger than time. He gave me courage. He gave me truth. He gave me the reason to never shrink in a world that once tried to erase me." There were murmurs of emotion in the crowd. My mother, Kiana, raised me with a quiet strength that echoed through everything she did. She didn't fight for revenge, she fought for legacy. She taught me that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it looks like showing up, telling the truth, and loving yourself anyway. Kiana blinked away a tear. "My family history is complicated," Lila said. "There was betrayal. There was silence. There was a woman who tried to control everything by hiding everything. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "She built an empire, then buried the people she stepped on to build it. She believed legacy came from power. But I learned something different. Legacy comes from truth, from love, and from choosing light over bitterness." Lila paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found her mother's. "Today, I don't carry my family's shame. I carry their stories. I carry the fight my father died for and the hope my mother lived for. I carry their dreams, and I make them my own." A hush fell again. "And I want every girl like me, who's ever been told her name doesn't belong in the history books, to know. You are your own beginning. Your voice is your inheritance. You don't have to wait to be written into the world." As applause rose, Lila stepped back. Kiana stood, tears in her eyes, heart full. Miles away, in a cold, forgotten prison cell, Eleanor Whitmore sat alone. The world no longer spoke her name. The empire had crumbled. The legacy had passed her by. But on that stage, under soft lights, stood a living reminder that the truth had outlasted the empire. And her name was Lila. If you enjoyed this powerful story of Kiana, Adrian, Lila, and Eleanor, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring content. What are your thoughts on how it all ended? Do you think justice was truly served? Drop your opinions in the comments and let us know how you felt about each character's journey. Rate this story on a scale of 1 to 10 and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you.